You don't have any Stephen King?
You've got the shinin'.
You mean shiny.
Shh! You wanna get sued?
It's just your fate. You're that geeky Stephen King kid. There's one of you in every school.
Okay, that's him, that's Cujo.
I was thinking along the lines of no TV and no beer make Homer something.
Oh, crazy.
Don't mind if I do!
Hello and welcome to Tower Junkies, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. Tower Junkies is a podcast celebrating the work of Stephen King, hosted by two lifelong constant readers. We do non-spoiler and spoiler reviews of King's published work and take a critical look at his film and television adaptations as well. We also discuss the latest King news and check in with each other on our ongoing King obsessions. It's the podcast where all things serve the King. You can find more of our work at TowerJunkiesPod.com. You can also like the Facebook page at facebook.com/TowerJunkiesPod and follow us on Twitter and every other level of social media at TowerJunkiesPod. And all these episodes will always be free, but if you want to support us with your money, you can become a patron at patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer for a ridiculous amount of bonus content spread across all of ObsessiveViewer.com's various podcasts. I'm one of your hosts, Matt Hurt, and it's just me today. Tiny is busy with life, and I am kind of doing this episode as an impromptu thing. This is going to be kind of an experiment, and I'll explain in a bit what we're doing here, but basically, today, May 25th, 2022, Stephen King released a new short story that's exclusive to Scribd.com. And if you sign up at Scribd.com, SCRBIBD, you can get access to it and a bunch of other podcasts and books and stuff. Both the ebook and audiobook version of the news story, which is called Finn, and it's about a 19-year-old Irish gentleman who is abducted suddenly by some less than desirable people, like some people of criminal minds, and he is held captive, and it becomes apparent that it is a case of mistaken identity, and he was not their intended target. And in Stephen King fashion, it gets a little weird and a little fun. So what I'm going to do with this episode of Tower Junkies is, since it's just me, I'm going to share my thoughts on Finn in both a non-spoiler and spoiler discussion or review. It's not really a discussion if I'm just talking into the ether, but it's just going to be me talking about the short story and kind of sharing my thoughts on it, because I listened to the audiobook today and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. We'll get into that in a bit, but the other point, or the other reason I wanted to do this as an episode. So if you are a longtime listener, you'll remember that last year, I think it was last year, Stephen King released a short story called Red Screen that was on Humble Bundle, as kind of a way to raise money and stuff for, I can't remember what charity it was, but it was a limited time. What I did with that was I read it, and then I posted a free review of it on our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. And what I did there was I instead of putting that behind a paywall, I made that free. So that is free on there, kind of as a way to kind of help promote the Patreon a little bit. And so what I'm doing with this one, since it's just a short story that's not collected anywhere or anything, it's a new short story, I'm going to share my thoughts in a non-spoiler and spoiler review. I was originally going to do this as a free Patreon thing, but I'm releasing it as a full episode because I'm going to add on a couple of previously Patreon exclusive short story reviews, because I've been doing what I'm calling the Church of Kings. So on Patreon, I basically use Patreon as this blanket kind of experiment to put new content out and exclusive content out for Patreon that doesn't necessarily fit into like a full episode of one of our podcasts. And it's kind of an all-encompassing thing, so you get bonus content for Obsessive Viewer, for Anthology, whenever I do Anthology, and for Tower Junkies. And what I've been concentrating on trying to do with Tower Junkies is I've been doing what I'm calling the Church of King, which every now and then I will release a collection of recordings of me talking about short stories in Stephen King's collected works. So in January, I did a 5-part series totaling about 6 hours of audio, all about Night Shift. I went story by story and I talked about Night Shift and shared my thoughts on each individual story. And then I took a little bit of a sabbatical because a lot of stuff happened. I moved, all that stuff. And now I'm back at it doing Skeleton Crew. And I have about 2 hours, I think, of audio, and I have probably a couple other hours that I'm gonna do to close out Skeleton Crew, and then I'm gonna move on to I think Everything's Eventual, and then eventually Just After Sunset. So what I'm gonna do with this episode is I'm gonna share my thoughts on Finn, and then I'm going to post, or I'm going to kind of pad this episode out with a sample of our Patreon. So you're going to hear my thoughts on Finn, and then after that, you'll hear my thoughts from January, or I think it was September that I recorded it, but my thoughts on the short story from Night Shift, I Know What You Need. And then after that, you'll hear my thoughts on the Raft from Skeleton Crew that I recorded last week, I think. So that's going to be kind of the layout for this episode. And my hope is that, it will maybe, get people to want to subscribe to the Patreon and everything. That's my hope, because peek behind the curtain, I really love doing this, and I really love doing Patreon stuff. And also, I'm hoping to I don't know. There's a new mixer out from Rode, and I'm really excited to get that, but I want to do that with Patreon funds. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. The content that's on Patreon, in addition to the Stephen King stuff, is I'm doing episode reviews of the Disney Plus Marvel shows. So I did Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I did, I believe I did WandaVision and Loki. I definitely did. And then I'm currently doing Hawkeye. The next I'm going to do Moon Knight, then Ms. Marvel, then She-Hulk. And then I also did the Hulu limited series Candy recently. And yeah, so that's at the $2 level. So if you want access to my TV and book reaction recordings and immediate reactions to movies I see in theaters or recent releases, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and pledge $2 per month. Now, if you do that right now, you will immediately get charged the $2, and then at the beginning of the month, you'll be charged for the next month. So if you want to wait until June 1st to do it, go ahead and do it. Once you do that, you get instant access to everything. Now, I also did an extensive part-by-part review of The Green Mile, the serial novel. So each part, I recorded my thoughts on each part as I was reading it. So I did that, and then I also, of course, did Billy Summers in about 5 parts as I was reading it. So there's a lot of content on there. So I'm just saying, like, hey, if you have the funds and you want more content from us, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and pledge at least $2 a month. And then if you pledge $5 a month, you get access to all of that, plus movie commentary tracks, which I've done. I've done Dr. Sleep, I've done The Shining, I think, and I've done, I'm going to do The Green Mile soon enough, and The Mist, and a bunch of other stuff I have on there. So check that out, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. That's my pitch for it. You'll hear content that is exclusive to Patreon later in this episode. But before I get into my thoughts on Finn, I do want to also mention that our very own Tiny was a guest on the delightful and fantastic Year of Underrated Stephen King podcast. Kim C interviewed him, and he had some really fantastic input about his history with Stephen King, that some stuff you may not have heard on the podcast. So check that out. The Year of Underrated Stephen King. We love that podcast. We're going to have Kim C on very soon. to talk about a couple other short stories from Skeleton Crew, and then we also have in the pipeline, or down the pike, or down the pipe, I don't know. We have plans to do hard case crime reviews with her, so look forward to that down the road and everything. But I'm very excited to have her on the show in the coming weeks. But in the interim, check out her show, The Year of Underrated Stephen King. In particular, check out her delightful chat with Tiny. And yeah, so okay. We are in this episode, guys, so let me go ahead and tarry no further, and let me go ahead and go into my thoughts on Finn, the new short story from Stephen King that was published today on Scribd.com, which you can get access to. I think if you go to StephenKing.com, there's a link that you can get a 60-day free trial of Scribd.com. If you just go to Scribd.com, you can get a 14-day trial, but once you sign up for the trial, you can cancel anytime, and you get access to all the stuff on there, but also you get access to Finn, both the ebook and the audiobook. So go ahead and do that. And yeah, so like I said, I'm going to do non-spoiler and a spoiler review for Finn. So let me go through my notes and let's talk non-spoilers about Finn. Okay, so in the audiobook form, I only listened to the audiobook. I didn't read the ebook, but I don't know how many pages it technically is, but the audiobook runs about 54 to 55 minutes total. And the interesting thing about it is that it's narrated by Kellen Boyle, I think is the name. And he is a phenomenal narrator. He's Irish, so that Irish accent is really kind of immersive with it, because this is an interesting story in that it takes place in Ireland. It's about this Irish kid who is taken hostage in a case of mistaken identity, kind of reminiscent to me, like a little, like very, very slightly to like mistaken identity stuff, like North by Northwest, I think, is what I was thinking of. But more so, it's just really unique because it's not Stephen King's, like, I don't know, his comfort level, or it's not his bread and butter of like Maine or, Americana or anything. It's Ireland. And in that respect, it kind of reminds me of the short story. I think it's Crouch End from, I think, Just After Sunset. And also, I think The Doctor's Case as well. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit, just kind of like not necessarily globe hopping, but somewhere that's completely different from what a location that we're not used to seeing from King's fiction. So I think the narrator did a phenomenal job, and I enjoyed the story. It is, I will say that as a running total, it is the 110th piece of short fiction that I've read from Stephen King, so that includes short stories and novellas. It's not going to break my top 19 short fiction list, but it's a pretty good little fun story, and mostly because it's from the perspective of this 19-year-old kid. His name is Finn Murray, and he it's got this like nice healthy dose of comedy in it for this kind of very serious and dramatic situation that he finds himself in, but it's kind of bathed in this comedy tone that I really appreciate in this story specifically, because he is this kid who he's basically had a run of bad luck his entire life. Like, he lost a toe in a firework accident. He was dropped as a baby. He was nearly or definitely struck by lightning and then hit his head and was unconscious for a couple of days. Like, he just has a run of bad luck. And there's a recurring piece of like a recurring I don't know, this recurring thing that his grandmother, I think, had said to him throughout his life, or his aunt had said throughout his life, that was, what was it? It was, for every piece of bad luck, it's something to the effect of, for every stroke of bad luck, there's two strokes of good luck. And Finn has never really had any good luck or anything. So he finds himself after a night of, how to put it delicately, after a night of amorous activity that left him unfulfilled with his girlfriend. As he says it in the narration, he says that he was so jazzed by the physical aspect of his time with his girlfriend that he had to run off the blue balls, basically. And so while in the heat of running through the city or running through the town, he bumps into a man and kind of stumbles and then picks himself up. And then in that moment, a van comes screeching to a halt, puts a bag over his head. The people in the van did, and then transport him to a secluded location. And that's where we get what is traditionally Stephen King's like eerie, dramatic, tense atmosphere. And there is that in this story, but it is bathed in that comedic light. And I think that it's mostly because we are in Finn's perspective. We don't have any context for why he was abducted. We don't have any context for what they abducted him for. It's kind of intimated, or it's kind of implied at the beginning that maybe they're just like gangsters and they just wanted to, like they were picking up a rival gang member or what have you. That was my assumption. And then as it progresses, we learn that there's maybe not enough, or maybe there's not much. there's how to phrase it without really going into spoilers, that really the people that have kept him, that have abducted him, are maybe not, maybe have like a screw loose, are maybe psychopaths and maybe insane. And that brings this level of tension and intrigue to the story, because it's still bathed in that comedic energy, but it's still kind of tense, because it's this, it shows that like the main captor, the guy that's kind of the head of the show, that's running things from his abductors, is this guy named Ludlum, which I have to assume is a reference to Robert Ludlum, who wrote the Bourne espionage novels, but it's got to be. I'm sure it is. But he is. It's kind of slowly unfurled or revealed to us that he's maybe not all there mentally. And like there's a moment when that becomes apparent. I won't give away what that is. Maybe I'll talk about that in spoilers, but there's a moment where he is handed something, where Finn is handed something and then put back in his little cell, or where he's being kept and everything, where he's looking at it and he's realizing like, these are psychopaths. Like this is weird. This is not what it seems. This is a very intriguing situation that I found myself in, a very precarious situation. And it's another run of bad luck for Finn. And another element to that is that he's trying, there's a level of, like a comedy of errors in the way that he is trying to explain to them that he's not the person that they're looking for. They're looking for someone named Bobby Feeney. And he is, he's Finn Murray. And there's a comedy of errors that plays out when he's trying to explain like who he is and explaining that he's not who they think he is and everything, but he can't really prove it. And in classic Stephen King fashion, he puts these obstacles in Finn's way in a kind of believable way. Like it goes to the point where it's like, okay, well, do you have an ID on you? And then he's like, well, oh shit, no, I left my ID with my girlfriend. And like he does this. And then when he does have a way to show that he is not who they think he is, it blows up in his face in a pretty comedic way, in a pretty interesting way. And it's another good example of Stephen King just kind of having fun with his writing and having fun with his storytelling, because he's leaving these like little breadcrumbs in Finn's kind of pleas to the captors, saying like, oh, my name is actually Finn Murray. And then he repeats that a few times with a little extra emphasis and a little more specificity. And we get his narration and his inner monologue saying like, okay, well, I'm being very specific, so they have to believe me. And then when they're in a position to actually know the truth and to find out the truth, it blows up in his face because of that specificity. And I love that, again, that comedy of errors and everything, while also playing with this very kind of low grade tension and thriller aspect and kind of terrifying premise of this man being held captive by people who think that he's someone else. And then when you learn more, we don't, and that's the thing, we don't really learn a lot because they are kind of working under a different scope of reality. Not that it's anything supernatural or anything. It's just a very heavily deranged thought process that goes into this. And it's something that Finn can't really work against or work out himself because it is just so out there. He's at a disadvantage because his captors are, or at least Ludlum is losing his mind a little bit. And I just found that to be a really interesting kind of wrinkle to the story. And it goes on to lead to, like, his interactions with Ludlum are pretty interesting, and there are varying degrees of intimidation employed. And I won't give away in this non-spoiler section what happens kind of toward the end of the story, but overall, it's a really entertaining little short story. It's a nice thriller that has this nice kind of cozy tone to it, mostly because we have this central character. We have this character named Finn who is at the mercy of these captors, but we are through his perspective, and we are knowing, or we are seeing really only the details that he's seeing, and not having the full details, it brings us into this deranged, kind of very confused and strange thought process that the captors have toward him. And it's this kind of balancing act, or it's this dance of, like, where do you have this information? And it's like every time they ask for something new from him, or for more detail or intelligence from him, it's something completely out of left field. But you can kind of tell that the internal logic of that, like, there is a certain logic that can be followed through their perspective, but we're seeing it through the prism of Finn's perspective. So we're just getting these little scant details here and there, and then as we, figure out, like, okay, well, there's insanity at play here, so it's probably nothing really. And it's just interesting to think about how Finn can kind of work through the situation and get to freedom, if he does get to freedom. It's really interesting. And the story ends in a way that I really love. I love when King does this kind of thing, and this is a kind of toying thing with with his writing, and I won't give it away or anything until I go into spoilers, but I really enjoyed the ending of the story, because I thought that it was very, very charming in a weird way, very charming and satisfying for me. But so I'll give my overall thoughts on Finn, and then I'll go into spoilers and everything. So really, I thought this was a fun story. I think I liked it more than Red Screen from last year on the Humble Bundle thing. And I thought this was a lot of fun. I think that there's a certain derangement that isn't really as threatening as King's other work. Like, it's a pretty, there's some violence in it. There's a little bit of brutality. I mean, there's torture in the story, but I think that just kind of that whole, like, the subject matter is softened by Finn being a relatable and likable personality in a weird way. And because we know all of these, like, little details about him, like, he is kind of cursed, he carries the curse of bad luck. And again, it's nothing supernatural. It's nothing out there or crazy. It's just his lot in life. And I kind of really like that, this grounded, like, realism in the face of kind of a just mentally deranged captor. I just find that to be an interesting kind of balancing act. So it was a really fun story, and I'll go into spoilers here in a moment, but I recommend checking it out. Go to Scribd.com, sign up for the free trial, check out the audiobook or the ebook, and and I'm curious when Stephen King will release another short story collection, because I feel like this, we have this, Red Screen, and there was one other short story that was released, I think, in early 2020. I don't remember it. I don't know if I really read that one, but, so he has short stories that can be collected. So I'm curious when we'll get another short story collection. My guess would be probably next year, since, this year is, Fairy Tale is coming out in September. So, and I'm very excited for that. So, okay, well, if you don't want to be spoiled on Finn, feel free to check the show notes for timestamps to get to the Patreon exclusive, previously Patreon exclusive recordings of I Know What You Need and the Raft. And those, I believe, are non-spoiler reviews. If I do spoil those stories, I believe I say whether or not I do. So if you want to skip over the spoilers for Finn, check the show notes. If not, or if you want to hear my spoilers on Finn, continue listening. So I'm going to play some music, and when I come back, I'm going to spoil Finn. Alright, so spoilers on for Finn, which once again you can find on Scribd.com if you have the free trial. You get access to the ebook and the audiobook version of it. I do recommend checking out the audiobook because narrator Kellen Boyle, I believe is the name, does a phenomenal job, and it's a really cool, immersive narration in the audiobook. So a couple of things I want to touch on is, in spoilers, is first and foremost what Ludlum and his group think Finn has. It's clear that they think that they are this espionage spy syndicate that's working to save the world and everything. So at first, I love the escalation of what they're asking him for. Like, they ask him where the briefcase is with the papers, and then I think when they go out to another room or what have you, when they go out to another room, I think he sees a briefcase with papers that are empty, maybe, or maybe I'm just imagining that. I don't remember. But anyway, he obviously doesn't know anything about the briefcase or anything about the papers. And then I love the escalation of that. We get the more detail, as weird and out there and out of left field it is, but it follows this internal logic. So we get the fact that they're looking for a briefcase with papers, and then we get the detail that they're looking for the blueprints for the bomb factory. I think that's what it was called. The bomb factory. And then the translation, and all we need to know is where you put the translation, and then also the key for the translation. These little details are enough detail to give us kind of the blueprint of an outline of what they are looking for, or what their objective is. But also it's also just enough detail to feel like, oh yeah, he's insane. Ludlum is insane. He has lost his marbles. He is operating under a completely different set of rules, or a completely imaginative reality. So there are no blueprints. There is no bomb factory. There is no translation or anything. So literally there is no way that Finn can fib his way out of it. There's no way that Finn can give them the information they seek, because the information that Ludlum is seeking does not exist and is not a part of reality, which I find really, really interesting in the fact that it just makes that tension a little bit more tense, because it brings to light this idea, this disturbing nature, that the derangement of Ludlum, that I think is really interesting. and the pamphlet. Like, that is the first indication that we get that Ludlum is insane. He gives him a pamphlet that's basically Ludlum's like version of the Geneva Convention. It's world approved techniques for advanced interrogation, and there's a lot of examples that are said like, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Threatening animals, not okay. And like anything else that's not mentioned here is probably okay. Like the comedy of the derangement of Ludlum through the prism of Finn reading the pamphlet is just very, very entertaining. It's entertaining and disturbing in a lower grade than what's kind of normally disturbing from Stephen King. And I don't want to say it's lighthearted, but it is enjoyable. It is entertaining. It's very entertaining. So I really like that. And then it gets more and more kind of intimidating when Finn notices like Ludlum has like dried blood on his knuckles or on his hands, and that kind of gives this intimidation factor as well. And also the delirium or disorientation of playing loud music and just really disorienting Finn and everything. And finally, it gets to the point where Ludlum offers him breakfast. And this I found really interesting because, first of all, Ludlum's mood is just completely like off kilter. It goes completely into derangement, full on derangement. He is kind of, it kind of has this feeling of a maniac cackling with glee at something that's unsettling, or something, not something that on the surface is unsettling, but it's like he's cackling at something that is an inside joke that the reader and everyone else isn't privy to. And I really like that because later Doc reveals that the breakfast that is being offered to Finn is poisoned. And I really like that because of the ambiguity of the ending, which I'll get to in a bit, but I found that really kind of appetizing and really interesting as well. In addition to that, the way that Ludlum kind of gives him the choice of getting breakfast, like he quizzes him. He gives him a trivia thing where he tells him that he can have breakfast if he can name 3 Elvis songs. That is completely random and absolutely insane. And I kind of realized while I was listening to the audiobook for the first time, I kind of realized, like, gun to my head, breakfast in my face, poison breakfast in my face. I'm shocked to say that, and a little embarrassed to say, I would not have been able to name 3 Elvis songs by their title. That's weird to me. Like, I'm not really a musically minded person. I like what I like, and everything. I don't really seek out music, but like, I just realized, like, someone as ubiquitous and famous as Elvis, I can't name the titles of like 3 of his songs. So I would not have gotten my breakfast, but yeah. And I kind of thought, so after the 3 songs thing, Ludlum asks him if he knows more, what he knows about Elvis as a person, and he gives this piece of trivia that is unsubstantiated. I don't know if this is true or not, but the detail that Elvis was a twin, but he absorbed the twin in utero. And like in the story they refer to it as fetal cannibalism, which I think would be an amazing like punk rock band name. Fetal cannibalism. It probably already is, but I don't know. But anyway, that when it gets to that point, I kind of thought that it was going to go into a direction of like Jordan Peele's Us, like doppelgangers. And there's that Twilight Zone episode that I can't remember the name of. I'm so sorry to the memory and estate of Rod Serling, but there's Mirror Image. Yeah, so I thought it was going to go that route, and I was surprised that it doesn't go that route, but it does go a route that I was entertained by, because he is taken away. Before he can get his breakfast, he is pulled out, and Doc and a couple of the other guys facilitate his escape, Finn's escape. And that I thought was really thrilling and entertaining and everything, because of the reveal that the mushrooms were poisoned, and the fact that like we get those breadcrumbs, we get that kind of narrative structure where we, like, Ludlum says to Finn directly, he says, hey, 2 of my men have already left and everything, have already left him. So this is a sinking ship and everything. So yeah, we don't really need you anymore. And kind of double speak, saying like, we're going to kill you. And then so Doc and the other guy facilitate Finn's escape. And I really like how the story kind of switches over to it's not a supernatural thing. It is an ambiguity thing. And I really like how open-ended it is and open to interpretation it is, because we have Doc explaining to Finn that like, oh yeah, and we've been working with Ludlum for a while, and he's completely lost it. He thinks only 2 people have left, but the entire crew has left him, and we are too. And he says, you don't deserve to die because he's the way he is now. And I found that interesting because there's a piece of information that we get from the other guy, not Doc, but the other guy, I don't remember the name, where he says that, yeah, we did good work. We did good work. We saved the world in 2017, and only about a dozen people even know about it. Which that feels kind of like a reference to maybe another Stephen King story, but I can't think of what he came out with in 2017, and I don't think there's a connection there. But correct me if I'm wrong. It could absolutely be something that I'm completely overlooking, but. As the story kind of reaches its conclusion, Finn is let free. He's set free. He's given $4,000 or 4,000 euros, and then he is walking home. And he decides to go to the park that is talked about at the beginning of the story, the park where he broke his arm, but had plenty of positive memories of playing in when he was a child. And this is where we get this really interesting, just character-motivated ambiguity, kind of exercise in ambiguity. It's where Finn is trying to figure out, like, this is what I find really appealing about the story. This man, who is just a victim of bad luck throughout his entire life, has now been given the good fortune of not being poisoned to death in a case of mistaken identity from a deranged lunatic who has kidnapped him under the false pretense that he has information that will save lives or that will stop a bomb manufacturer or something like that. And he has gotten out of that scot-free with $4,000 in his pocket, and he is going back home. Faced with that bit of incredible good fortune, he immediately thinks like, oh, well, when I was a kid, we read An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, and that whole story is about a man who is hanged, and then the twig snaps, and he gets to freedom, and he escapes, but it turns out that it's all in his head and that he actually died. And that was like the moment that he died, his brain made him think that he was free and escaped and everything. What if that's happening to me? And I love that as a bit of levity in the ambiguity, because this is a character who has been down on his luck his entire life. And he has been told his entire life that, oh, every piece of bad luck is met by 2 pieces of good luck. And he's just never had that good luck. And now he has the good luck, and he's questioning it. He thinks that it's just going to be like he's going to wake up and he's going to be dead. And I love that it goes back to all the different things in his life. Like, oh, well, maybe he ate the breakfast, and this is his brain telling him that, like, giving him a pleasant memory as he's dying. Or maybe when he was being waterboarded, he's actually drowning, and this is his brain trying to take him to a pleasant thought before he dies. Or maybe it goes as far back as when he ran into the other guy, and maybe he fell and hit his head in the same spot where he hit his head when the lightning struck him as a kid or whenever, and maybe he's in a coma or something, or maybe he's dead, which I thought that was really fun. That was a fun little nod to the Dead Zone, because that's basically what happens to Johnny Smith. So I like that. And then King ends the story with him climbing on the top of the playground equipment, and then he just says I think Elvis has left the building or something, and then we're left with the thought of him jumping, and we don't know if he is, we don't know if he'll wake up dead or if he is in reality. And I just love that. I think that that's a fun way to kind of end this kind of fun story that has been grounded throughout the entirety of the story. It's grounded in reality. The only kind of piece of not reality is in the mind of Ludlum, because it's kind of clear that he is deranged and he has several issues with him, that he's not operating in reality. There's nothing supernatural about this, but that kind of infectious way that doubt is sown in Finn's mind is really satisfying and pleasant, because it's just so, I don't know, it's really fun to have this character question his reality after this out of this world crazy experience that is completely grounded in reality, save for the people that's orchestrating it for him or at him. It being something that is just that is a product of deranged thinking. So I kind of like the way that it kind of grafts on to Finn's mentality, because he's questioning his reality now, because he can't believe that he just had the good fortune of surviving this ordeal. So I think that it's a really fun story. It's kind of cute. It's fun. It's energetic. It's thrilling. It has some tension in it. Again, it's not going to make my top 19 short stories or anything, but it's a fun story. Like King still has it. And and I'm just really happy that, he's still putting out this level of content this late in his career. So those are my thoughts on Finn. Let me know what you thought and everything. And now I'm going to throw it to my thoughts, my previously only available on Patreon thoughts to I Know What You Need from Night Shift. Again, if you want more exclusive Patreon content, including about a total run of 6 hours worth of audio of me going through story by story, going through the Night Shift collection, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at $2 per month. You'll get access to that, my thoughts on Billy Summers as I was reading it, my thoughts on The Green Mile piece by piece, and my thoughts on Skeleton Crew as I go through it. I have 2 more big episodes to do for Skeleton Crew, and then I'll be done with that. So there's a ton of content on Patreon for you guys at the $2 level. But if you want to also bump up to the $5 level, you get access to all of that, plus plenty of commentary tracks for Stephen King movies and non-Stephen King movies. I did a lot of commentary tracks. So yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes as well. I do have a specific tag for Stephen King content on Patreon, so I'll put a link to that specific tag, and then you can see all the Stephen King content there, and choose if you want to become a patron or not. So without further ado, I'm gonna throw it to I Know What You Need, which is a review of that story from Night Shift that I recorded last year and threw on Patreon in January of this year. So enjoy that, and then after that, I'm gonna throw it to my thoughts on Skeleton Crew's The Raft. So enjoy. Okay, and next up in this cavalcade of King collected content conversation. I don't know what the fuck that was. Okay, so next up, I'm going to be talking about I Know What You Need. And I Know What You Need is a short story in, obviously, Night Shift. that was originally published in the September 1976 issue of Cosmopolitan. And holy crap, guys, this story is just incredible. I mean, it is phenomenal. It obviously was first published in 1976, as I just said, and it's sad how much things do not change with time. So this story, reading it now in the 2020s, after like the Me Too movement, and with more kind of with more attention paid, rightfully so, to how people interact with each other, and most notably how the growth of the just ridiculous, stupid incel movement and nice guyism has been given a platform, with the internet being a way to collect people of like-minded attitudes, and how like the whole red pill thing, nice guys, incels, all that bullshit has created this kind of this echo chamber of toxic masculinity and misogyny, and just this infinite feedback loop of negativity and cynicism and gross, just abhorrent hatred, really. And so reading I Know What You Need, with that stuff in mind, this story is timeless. It is incredible. It is the story of Elizabeth Rogan, an attractive college student who is approached by a man of nondescript looks, as King describes him, named Ed Jackson Hamner Jr. And he first tells her, I know what you need. And he seems to know everything that she needs, and all of her needs, and what she's thinking and everything. He has this eidetic memory, supposedly. So he gives her tips and a cheat sheet on the sociology test that she's freaking out about. And he seems to know exactly when she most needs to be comforted, and exactly what she wants, how she wants to be comforted, and how she wants to be interacted with. And this story just is stunning. It is absolutely stunning in the way that it delves into this very just messed up, twisted relationship that grows between them. And it's something that is so I'm not going to say relatable, but it is so truthful to, like I said, that whole red pill bullshit, nonsense, incel crap. And it is horrifying in that respect. Like, this is a horrifying story because it is about someone taking advantage of another person and creating a dependence upon them when that person is at their most vulnerable and most confused. There is a line that's repeated a couple of times in this story, that it's when her roommate is confronting her about her relationship with Ed. Her roommate Alice says, "That's not love at all, that's rape." And that line recurs a couple pages later as well, and that's truthful. It is about consent. It's about this creating this, like Ed Hamner is creating in this interaction with Elizabeth. He's creating, like I said, this kind of just dependence upon him. And it is all manufactured. It is all nefarious. It is dangerous and everything. And as the story progresses, what I really love about it is the way that Elizabeth rationalizes it. And it's this interesting growth of like this, 30 page story? I think it's only 20 pages. This 20-page story where she becomes dependent upon him and becomes like at one point in her inner monologue, it says that she's already halfway toward falling in love with him. And when you have that level of vulnerability with a person, it comes with obviously this trust and this level of commitment, and the breakneck pace of the relationship between Ed and Elizabeth creates in it this very much closed-minded and blinders effect on Elizabeth herself. Like when Alice is confronting her about it, she does not want to hear it. She does not want to hear how this plays out. She does not want to hear the truth about Ed because she thinks that she's in love with him. And like there's even a part where Alice, her roommate, says, love is blind, huh? And it's just like, it's just so well written and intricate and truthful to human emotion in like vulnerable states, especially when you're dealing with, young love, relatively speaking. I mean, these are characters who are in college, presumably, early 20s, maybe very late teens, probably early 20s now that I'm thinking about it. But I mean, these are emotionally compromised people, and to have a character take advantage of an emotionally compromised or just an emotionally compromised person is abhorrent and evil and scary and terrifying. And the way that Ed Hamner is written throughout this story is incredibly effective as a villain character and scary character, because we know that there's something going on. We know that there's something behind it and everything, but the way that he is written, like the way it's every time he appears in the text, it's really from Elizabeth's perspective, because she's kind of it's third person, but she is kind of the focal character. And so we're seeing the story through her eyes, through a third person perspective. And this enables it to be this very quick and immersive story of this woman that is falling in love with this man and doesn't understand why she's falling in love with him. And she doesn't quite understand how she is becoming so attached to this person. And that is so interesting and so scary. And in light of the Me Too movement and the incel bullshit and everything, that is just that's what makes it so timeless to me and so frightening, because it is residing in this truthfulness, this level of this level of God, what's the word I'm looking for? Like this level of for Ed, it's like this level of where he, oh God, why can't I think of the word? I'm freaking out here. This level of, oh my God, entitlement. Okay, this level of entitlement that he has to her feelings, because he believes that because he is giving her everything that she needs, he's giving her everything that she could want before she even knows that she wants it. Like when he takes her to dinner and he orders her food and everything. And when he says that she wants a strawberry double dip cone and then he comes back with it and everything, when that's in the like background of her mind, just in the very far back of it, this is a level of entitlement that he has. Like he feels like he is owed her affection and her attention simply because he's attracted to her, or simply because he has this fixation on her. I won't give away the end of the story or anything, or the truth behind who he is and what he is and everything. But I will say that on the surface, him having this sense of entitlement and this idea that that she belongs to him is such a terrifying proposition and such a horrifying story in and of itself, especially in light of like the incel community, how people seem to be this kind of very gross misogyny of people wanting to take ownership of other people's emotions and feelings and not having they're not letting them be their own individual person, or letting them make their own choices just because they are attracted to this person or because they want to be with this person. So therefore this person belongs to me. And it's something that's just so grotesque and horrific, and to see it written out so just naturally in a story that's written in 1978 is just such a bummer. It's such a bummer that in terms of interpersonal relationships and like there's been a lot of growth over the decades. Obviously there's been a lot of growth in terms of relationships and progressiveness and everything. Like all this stuff has happened, but at its heart, like we still have these outliers of just bullshit incel people and red pillars and stuff and just gross misogyny and everything, where people think that they're entitled to the affections of other people simply because they're attracted to this person. And it's just, it's just deplorable. It's horrible. So, and it's this idea of the loss of the individual, like of, okay, if someone wants to be in a relationship with someone, that means that someone needs to be, you know, absorbed into them and needs to be someone who is at their beck and call and everything. And it's like this sense of ownership, like it's this sense of being owed this by having these special feelings toward another person. I'm rambling so much here. I just got so much out of this story. I really am just so taken with it every time I read it. And what I find also very interesting about it is that it isn't a story that makes Elizabeth an out and out damsel. Like, she is not a character who is completely at the whim and the will of this horrible character and this horrible person who is taking away her individuality, her decision-making ability, her choice in what she really wants and would prefer to have and everything. He is emotionally manipulating her in various ways and everything. And what I like about the story is that she is not, all told, she is not like a completely helpless character in that respect. There's a scene where she has a nightmare. This is shortly after she first encounters Ed, and she has this boyfriend who wants to marry her and everything, and she's like, after meeting Ed and after some interesting Ed encounters, she starts feeling like, okay, she doesn't want to marry Tony. She doesn't want to marry her serious boyfriend or anything. She can only think of Ed Hamner Jr. And so she has this dream where it's so vivid, it's so cool. God damn it, I love it when King just goes into this immaculate detail of a setting of a subconscious state. So she has this dream where she is in a shallow grave and Tony is giving her an ultimatum saying like, okay, marry me or else. And then she's paralyzed with fear and dread and everything. And she says no, or I think she doesn't say anything. I don't know. But then he comes back with a bulldozer and starts to bury her alive. And then we get this just completely hokey, like, heroic moment in the dream from Ed Hamner just vanquishing Tony and everything. And the reason that I'm going into so much detail with this is that I love this for Elizabeth, because when in the dream, when Ed like picks her up out of the grave and everything, she like his hand transforms into this like Timberwolf saber or something like that. And what I love about that is her subconscious. That is her brain signaling to her that, okay, this is not natural. This is not something that you need. Like, this is something that is just off kilter. And you're not conscious of it because the power that he's wielding is so overbearing and everything. But this is me, the brain, signaling to you, the person, that this is not everything is above board with this man. So I just love that little bit. And then like, as she is kind of coming to terms with it throughout the story, like later in the story, and as she's piecing together the different like anachronistic things that could not be true and that are just blatant evidence of him manipulating her and orchestrating things in his favor, it is this struggle between her, like what she thinks she desires and what she is conscious of and what she is aware of, and how all these pieces are coming together in a way that is just so horrifying in such a significant way. And in that respect, I'm not going to spoil the ending of this story or anything, but I will say that I love how King does not put it into like the ending. It goes into some interesting places. There's reference to the Necronomicon, which I thought was interesting. I've never read Lovecraft, but I'm aware that, you know, the Necronomicon is his doing, and I know that King is a huge Lovecraft fan. But it goes into some pretty deep mythological and some interesting magic stuff, I guess I'll say that much. But what I love about it is that the kind of climax of the story isn't this big bombastic violence thing or anything like that. It is a mental, it is this emotional kind of climax for Elizabeth as she's you know, faced with the truth of Ed Hamner and confronting him and confronting what he's happened. And I love that. I was so much more engaged with that than I would have been if it was this out and out, like, oh, I'm going to vanquish this evil person by destroying them and killing them and everything. And it's not like this pulpy or gratuitous thing. It is solely resting in the emotional state of the story and the emotional importance of it. And I just respect it so much for that reason. Because it just makes that central theme, the kind of idea of the complete immorality and just abhorrence of creating a scenario orchestrating things to take away someone's individuality in favor of creating a dependence upon you for them, strictly because you are attracted to them or you want them to be a part of your life. Like, that is just, it's not love, it's rape, like the story says. And it's just, to have it end in such with such an emotional climax for the character is so fulfilling and just makes it an incredibly, a much stronger statement and a much stronger narrative to end it that way. So, okay. I did not expect me to ramble so passionately about this story, but I love it so much. I really, really do. So those are my thoughts on I Know What You Need. It is one of my favorites of this whole collection. It is so, so good. I don't think it's my absolute favorite of the collection, because I think that still is, what was my favorite of the collection? Sometimes they come back. But I think it is a very close number 2, to it. Yeah, it's such an amazing 22-page story from King, and I love it so much. So those are my thoughts on I Know What You Need. And now we're going to go on to my thoughts on the final story of this section of my part of my 5-part Night Shift episode series for Patreon. But this final one is a big one. It is a doozy. It is Children of the Corn. So stay tuned for my thoughts on Children of... All right, and now to round out this episode, I'm going to throw it to my thoughts on the Raft from Skeleton Crew, which I recorded more recently for Patreon. Again, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, become a patron at $2 per month or $5 per month, or if you want to go big, go $10 per month. And yeah, again, if you go to patreon.com and become a patron, you get charged immediately and you get instant access to all of the content under the tier that you subscribe to. So, and it's kind of a cascading effect. So you do the $2 tier, you get access to all the $2 content and the $1 content, which is usually just us just kind of farting around and kind of just shooting the breeze and everything. If you do $5, you get access to the $5 stuff, the $2 stuff, and the $1 stuff all in one go. Again, check the show notes. I have a tag specifically for Stephen King content. You can check that out, browse it, and everything. But yeah, so hope you guys consider checking that out. Yeah, and yeah, it's a recurring monthly payment, so you'll have access to it as long as the fees keep coming. It's charges once a month at the beginning of the month. Just one flat rate, whatever tier you have. So $2, you get charged $2 on the first of the month, and then you have access to everything. So at that level and below. So check that out. Once again, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. And now I'm going to throw it to my previously Patreon exclusive review of the Raft. Oh God, my voice cracked so bad right there. My previously Patreon exclusive content recording review of the Raft from Skeleton Crew. Again, I'm working on doing the full run of Skeleton Crew, story by story, so there's plenty more content on Patreon for you. But for now, enjoy this review of the Raft. Okay, and I am back with my thoughts on The Raft, which was first published as a booklet that was included with Gallery in November of 1982. And then apparently it was expanded and revised into a short story that was then collected in Skeleton Crew. And of course, it is one of the segments of Creepshow 2, which Tiny and I covered in an episode of Tower Junkies. So, as an actual story, man, I really like this story. It is a very creepy and unsettling monster story, kind of with echoes of Jaws and like a little bit of The Blob as well. But mostly like Jaws and mostly Jaws, really. And the ambiguity of it. So the summary of it, or the basic plot of The Raft, is that this group of 4 college students it's October, so they go to this lake that has been kind of, shut down for public use since Labor Day. And they go to where this raft is. They swim out to the raft to just basically swim out and have some fun. But there is this oil slick looking thing in the water that becomes a harbinger for their doom. It is a monster that we don't get any detail. We don't get any we have no idea what it is exactly. And I love that bit of ambiguity because we don't need to have any details of it. Like, this is an example of King telling a monster story that isn't predicated on knowledge of what the monster is. Like, it doesn't need to be. This is just a monster story with some teenagers at its center. And that's something that I really appreciate too, is that the teenagers, there are 4 of them. There's there's 4 of them: Randy, Deke, Loretta, and Rachel. And what I really like about this is instead of going into detail about the monster and what it is or where it's from, like the scant details we get about it are, pretty straightforward. It's a monster that if you make contact with the water near it, it will come after you. If there are, it's basically that. And I love that. But what we get instead of detail about it is we get some detail about the characters, and like these are just basically straightforward characters, college characters. But what I love about it is that Stephen King writes it as this. It's not any big fluffy kind of backstory or anything. It's pretty standard work. But what he does is he brings us into particularly Randy's point of view, where he feels a little insecure and a little and a little I guess outclassed. That's not the right word. He seems a little out of his element, a little unsure, a little insecure in relation to Deke, who is this kind of Lothario, is that the right word? I don't know. This Lothario, I think is the word I'm looking for. But anyway, this kind of man's man, kind of all-state football star who can get any woman he wants and everything, and has this confidence that isn't that is something that Randy struggles with because he's smaller. He doesn't have that level of confidence in him, and the way that kind of informs the story is interesting because he has these little like mental bits where he's like, well, like he's jealous, really. Like when Deke starts to kind of move in on Lorraine or Loretta, and with when Randy had like a thing for her, it's just this sting of jealousy and guilt, and then he rationalizes it by saying like, well, if he was infatuated with her and he was attracted to her and everything, but if he was in love with her, he wouldn't have brought her anywhere near Deke because he wouldn't have been able to compete or anything, and he knew how Deke was. And that's an kind of interesting kind of subconscious or interesting social commentary, I guess, to mine from that. It's not, like I said, this is not anything too deep or too detailed or anything. It's just this interesting example of Stephen King writing this kind of human story of this monster that's attacking these humans and coloring it with some interesting detail about the insecurities of the core group of characters that we get. And I appreciate that. It's something that it's a great example of Stephen King putting the story not necessarily on the back burner, but making sure that there is enough detail to make the story enough of a thrilling and sympathetic kind of thing. And when I say sympathetic, I mean mostly the characters, but also like there's some interesting elements to it that feel a little bit not problematic. It's nothing like that. It's more it kind of showcases the jealousy and the insecurities of Randy in particular. Like when he has the mental thought like he could hit her, he could punch her because he was like angry at her. I think it's at Loretta or Lorraine, whatever her name is, because he had a thing for her and he saw that that, oh my God, Deke was moving in on her. And just like that kind of jealousy, that kind of disappointment and insecurity kind of reaches a point where he's like, well, he could hit her because she's being annoying about something, or she's not taking it seriously. I don't remember the exact context, but I thought that was kind of an interesting like part of the story where it just kind of takes this jealousy angle and puts it into a different context for the story as a whole. I don't know. I appreciated that a little bit. I thought that it was an interesting bit of coloration for the Randy character, that he's not just this lovelorn character. He's this complicated and kind of a-hole-ish character to an extent. And then toward the end of the story, I won't give it away or anything, but there's a moment with him and Loretta or Lorraine. I want to say it's maybe Lorraine. I don't know. I'm so sorry. But there's a moment with him and her that is pretty interesting, and it makes sense in the context of the story. It's kind of they're kind of stranded, and it's the classic like, oh, we're moments away from dying, so that adrenaline is making this kind of attraction kind of set in. And it's an interesting scene because the way it ends is horrifying. Like it's really cool. I really like the way that the story kind of progresses there. And I just found it to be an interesting close of the arc for Randy in particular, because he quote unquote got the girl, but it's just an interesting, I don't know how exactly to quantify it or how to explain it, but there's this arc that spreads throughout the story where Randy, like I said, is insecure and jealous of Deke, despite being, like really good friends with him and everything. And it's like this it's just tapping into this very interesting mental state that, it's this kid who hasn't reached the social standing or social acclamation of some of his peers. And Deke represents like this just giant personality and just very like cocksure personality and like this bravado. He has it all in Randy's eyes, and I just really appreciate the way that the story kind of develops that and takes Randy into being, while not exactly like a very good person per se, but it takes him into being like a kind of a not hero arc, but he becomes like a protagonist. He becomes a survivor throughout the story. Like, he is our central character. He is our protagonist that we see most if not all of the story through his eyes. And I just really like that journey for that character from insecurity to kind of quote unquote alpha. It reminds me a lot, and I think I've mentioned this I definitely mentioned this in my night shift coverage, I think, or maybe earlier in this one, but I think it was night shift. But it reminds me a lot of one of my favorite movies, 28 Days Later, where that story, I really love the structure of that story, as Cillian Murphy's character, Jim, is taken from just an outsider who is just thrown into this apocalyptic event, and then he slowly becomes like this alpha male savior for his companions in the movie. And I really like that arc as well, and I always appreciate when I see that in other art. Not obviously 28 Days Later came out well after the Raft, but I really like that type of character arc, that hero's journey arc for a character, where something is a crazy scenario is thrust upon them, and then they have to adjust to that and become someone much stronger than they were at the start. It's a very standard storytelling device. It's a very standard narrative structure, but I really appreciate when it's done well. And here in The Raft, I think it's done particularly well, and there's a lot of good stuff in it. Now, as far as the actual horror aspect of it, like I said, this is an incredible like monster story. This is a very good and scary story. It is very disturbing. The detail of the violence is very, standard King. It's very good stuff. It's very gross and grotesque. And it also kind of informs the characters a little bit also, and those arcs that I kind of referenced too. Like when Deke, there's a moment with Deke where, I don't want to spoil it, but anyway, there's a moment with Deke that, like the let's see, what's the perception or the perspective is focused on his state ring from football, like his state championship ring. And I just love that as this kind of wink at the audience, or wink at the reader, saying like, oh yeah, this is a top dog, like very confident and athletic and just like conventionally heroic, I guess, or maybe not heroic, but like he's the conventional protagonist, and we're focusing on this football championship ring in a situation where he is not like the fighter that the story would have. And what I really like also about this is that it is a fairly brief story. It's longer than some in the collection, longer than several in the collection, but also it's shorter than some others. But what I do appreciate about it is that all of that insecurity, all of that slow build, or insecurity and jealousy and everything is internal. There's no real outward conflict among the characters, and I think that that's a really good way to tell this story, because that puts the focus on the monster. It puts the focus on the horror of what's going on. And I'm glad that we didn't have like any big outburst of anger among the group or whatever, because it wouldn't, as as unrealistic and crazy as this story is, that would make it a little less. That would have made it too dramatic. It would have made it too. It would have taken me out of the story to have like two characters be like, oh well, I'm mad at you because of this, while we're stranded on a raft while a monster is trying to kill us. Like, it just wouldn't have fit. So I really appreciate the way that Stephen King was able to introduce this interpersonal conflict, but through the perspective of one central character and his insecurities, his perspective of what's going on, and his ego and jealousy. And that's the interpersonal conflict we have. It's through one character. And I just found that to be really good and really satisfying because, like I said, the rest of the story is this monster story that is crazy and graphic and terrifying. And I really appreciated it. As far as the adaptation in Creepshow 2, I can't really remember what all we said about it in the episode, but I liked it. I think that I think that I think that it's appropriate to have this as a segment of an anthology movie. I don't know if it would really be able to sustain a full-on movie, but I think that they did well enough with it. I would say that it would be interesting to see it readapted, maybe in the Creepshow TV show. I think that would be pretty interesting to see that done. But yeah, as it stands now, this is a really good story. And I also wonder if I haven't seen the movie Cabin Fever in a very long time. I didn't really care for Cabin Fever, but there's like one part in it that kind of reminds me of this. I think that there was a scene where I think Ryder Strong is like on a boat or something, or near like a dock or something like that. And I wonder if if this story had any influence on, I think it was Eli Roth that made Cabin Fever. I might be wrong, but I don't know, maybe, but I might be grasping at straws. But anyway, those are my thoughts on The Raft. I really, really enjoy this story. I think that it's a lot of, it's good monster fun, and the horror is it scratches a certain, itch for scary, kind of violent monster stuff. So I really liked it, and yeah, that's The Raft. And I'm gonna round out this episode, or this segment of Skeleton Crew reviews and everything, with Word Processor of the Gods. So stay tuned. All right, and that's it for this episode. I just want to say thank you guys once again for listening, and make sure you check out Kim C's interview with Tiny on her podcast, The Year of Underrated Stephen King. Absolutely phenomenal episode. It was a lot of fun to listen to. I wasn't involved with it, but it was a lot of fun to listen to them talk about King and everything. So check that out. The Year of Underrated Stephen King. Also rate and review her podcast. She's fantastic, and she does a great job with the podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and close us out here. Once again, I want to say thank you guys for supporting us, and for actually, let me go here. Thank you guys so much for supporting us. And once again, check out patreon.com/obsessiveviewer for more Patreon content on Patreon. So all right, I am going to head out. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Also, long days and pleasant nights, and may you have twice the number.
This podcast was edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find links to all of our shows at ObsessiveViewer.com/podcasts. For exclusive bonus content, including reviews, commentaries, and B-roll episodes, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.